Hello everyone, this is update for June 27, 2024, day 855 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for June 25 and 26. I'm gonna start with general strategic updates. I'm gonna do a macroeconomic update on Sunday. There's some information, but there's nothing earth-shattering. Just want to keep the sort of kind of chronicling what's happening, but otherwise things kind of like moving along. But I would say things are getting somewhat more tense in terms of situation between China, Taiwan, Philippines, US, basically that whole Asia Pacific area becoming quite heated. There is intense confrontation, and confrontation is going up in its intensity. You've probably seen this almost daily incidents between Chinese Navy and Filipino Navy, and things getting progressively more intense between the two. There is increasingly more aggressive rhetoric between Taiwan and China, to the point that Chinese Minister of Defense basically stating that Taiwan is not going to exist, and so on, and telling that the Taiwanese president is essentially a criminal and will be punished, and things of that nature. Similar rhetoric is happening on Taiwan side, basically stating that they're going to be independent and so on. It's very clear that things on the rise in terms of tension there, and the best way to describe it is probably kind of say it's kind of like a pre-war dance. That looks like there's nothing is set in stone. There's never 100% probability for anything, but things are definitely looking extremely negative there. There is obviously, everybody knows, non-stop flights of Chinese aircraft and Chinese Navy. Similar situation, reconnaissance missions by including U.S. aircraft flying, trying to understand what's going on the Chinese side. So there's definitely definite tension on the rise. Let's put this way. Also, I think Taiwanese Minister of Foreign Affairs recommended its citizens not to visit China. So that's things that reminded how the war in Ukraine started, where there were also alerts by most European countries and obviously US to its citizens not to visit Ukraine, not to leave Ukraine, and of that nature. So we probably at very early stages of that with Taiwan, but clearly signs remind what predated war in Ukraine. Similar situation is actually switching a little bit to Near East, and similar situation is between Lebanon and Israel. There's several European nations issued warnings to its citizens to leave Lebanon as soon as possible, and so on, which looks like that invasion by Israel is imminent and is going to happen, which, as everybody understands, can trigger much bigger escalation involving Iran, involving potentially even Turkey, which can turn into extremely out of control conflict there as well. So as we can see, things are flaring up around the world in the main sort of places of this tension. Now I'm gonna switch to the situation in Ukraine, and I'm just gonna jump to the Oh, to the military update, but before I actually go there, I want to mention that Russian Minister of Defense issued sort of command or order to Russian Overseas Minister of Defense to take measures against reconnaissance missions by UK and US aircraft or UAVs as well included in the Black Sea area. And what this is obviously vaguely measured, vaguely worded. What stands behind it, we will probably find out fairly soon. But there's, as I mentioned before, there's very clear decision by the Russian military top and political top to do something about this reconnaissance missions of the US UAVs and British UAVs aircraft. Basically doesn't matter. Now let's walk through the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do it, starting from very north all the way to Kharkiv. Situation more or less stable. Nothing, no new incursions by Russian side at this point. Now let's jump to the situation northeast of Kharkiv. And this is a little bit updated map. I felt like the previous one was a little bit outdated, and I'll compare so you can show the progress by Ukrainian forces. As I mentioned, they mentioned to squeeze Russian troops and basically localize this incursion and make it, I would say, unviable strategically for the Russian side, where the situation is similar to what was with Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side of Dnipro River in Kherson area, Krinky. It's basically mirror situation where Russian command, Russian military does not have enough resources to break through from this bridgehead, similar to what Ukrainian command faced, where there is sort of asset, but you can't really use that asset, and that was valuable asset, and eventually you had to abandon it, and in a way, in exchange for effectively, localizing and plugging hole here along the border. On the northeast of Kharkiv. So this is essentially something similar is happening. In some ways, it's probably kind of like you can exchange between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine lost that bridgehead. Russia effectively losing this bridgehead northeast of Kharkiv. But the point is that it was split at this point into two pieces. Ukrainian, this small one, where Ukrainian forces are attacking and pushing into Gleboke. So Gleboke is kind of like contested village at this point. It's not clear situation. All is clear. There's fighting going on for it. And then the other one, bigger, center around Vovchansk. And in this situation, it's also Russian side is on defensive, attempting to hold on to at least some parts of Vovchansk. They also digging in north of Vovchansk. So basically, they're trying to hold to at least something, and effectively that, which was from the very beginning, it was very clear that this incursion does not have resources into it. Potentially I can hypothesize that there was potentially clever decision to force Ukrainian command to abandon this Krinky bridgehead. This is just hypothesis and completely wild hypothesis. But if it's true, that's pretty clever. That was pretty clever move. Let's put it this way. Now this is how it used to be. You can see that now it's split into two, becoming smaller and so on. So basically like dying. Now let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here remain more or less the same. Russian troops are pushing. Main objective Kupiansk, obviously. There is some progress where Russian troops are moving 100, 300 meters forward, but there's no major village, so I'll provide update once that happens. Similar situation here. There are small advances, but they are sort of too little to show on the big picture map. Now let's move to the North Donbass section of the front line. Again, similar situation. Russian troops continuing pressure in the northern part of it, in all typical areas. Verkhnyo-Kamensk, Ilyimka, Spirne, Rozdolivka. They even claim that they control a significant portion of Rozdolivka. Don't have confirmation, but would not surprise me, let's put it this way. Then situation west of Bakhmut remains more or less the same. Russian troops stuck at this point, simply lacking resources. There's not enough resources to continue the way Russian military is doing its operations, and that's really, and also because of that, there was sort of last-ditch attempt and do the frontal squeeze, which actually put Russian military even in a worse situation, where they effectively really lost last sort of resources on this frontal squeeze, which basically was even worse decision. So for now, it's on low scale attacks. The problem in the long run for Ukrainian side is it's a war of attrition, right? So in the long run, even this sort of no movement attacks lead to attrition of Ukrainian forces, which, if they not resupplied, eventually it may lead to collapse of the front line. So in other words, the situation is stable on temporary basis. It's not strategically stable, let's put it this way. Now this is just a picture that I showed before. There's no really meaningful updates here. Well, except this is a little bit out of date, and Russian troops control portion of Kalinivka, but not entirety of it. Now let's move to the central Donbass section of the front line, where things are, I would say, the worst for Ukrainian forces, and where I believe that Russian command pulled all of its resources from other section of the front line included to continue this this attack, which obviously consumes a lot of resources, but at the same time there is progress that's happening. So as you can see, if we compare to the situation before, Russian troops are slowly but surely, moving, specifically in this Novoalexandrivka area, and more closer moving along the railroad line towards this village Progress, and also essentially starting attacks against Yevhenivka. So, and the situation around Yasnobrodivka is also is becoming, and I actually didn't put Ukrainian troops here, but it's controlled by Ukrainian troops. So as you can see, it's kind of like strategically for Ukrainian forces, they need almost like evacuate this Yasnobrodivka sooner than later. I'm not saying it's imminent, but it's strategically Ukrainian forces are backed into the corner here, where they probably will have to leave this place, especially if Novoselivka Persha falls. Then at that point, this is going to be the fate is going to be sealed. But essentially, the most intense Russian push is happening. It's called between Vozdvizhenka and Novoselivka-Persha, this area, and there are some small advances, but the push is non-stop. This is the picture from June 12th, but as you can see, this definitely it slowed down. There's no question about it. There is some, I would say, level of exhaustion on Russian side where they simply will need more resources eventually. This is just a big picture of the same area. If we look in the south area, things are, I would say, also sort of Russian troops stuck, so they still going through Krasnohorivka without actually that much of a success. They effectively stuck west of Marinka. So there's sort of, how to say, natural pause in the air, because Ukrainian army got some new resources, new soldiers. Even they're not the best quality. Most of these people don't have pretty low motivation. Nevertheless, people on the front line better than no people on the front line, and so this kind of tilted balance of power into more or less closer to equal. There's still advantage on the Russian side, and even just because there is better quality of the command of the Russian military. It's not hugely, but it's better at this point. It's absolutely clear, because Russian military command is moving forward, progressing. This baby step progress, but still it is progress, versus Ukrainian top military command is stuck and simply extremely rigid and incapable of self-development and moving forward. Now let's look at the situation along the Zaporizhya front line. So things here are more or less quiet. There's no meaningful pressure. There's always some kind of probing attacks and so on, but largely this section of the front line is quiet, and this is sort of confirming that statement that I made before, that Russian command apparently pulled all of its resources to that area west of Avdiivka. Doesn't mean that, for example, entire units are moved. It's typically patchy, which is again also example of poor command, where could be, let's say, battalion or regiment that's sort of fresh and available. It's being pulled into other area, and so essentially you break down coherent unit. That happens obviously on the Russian side. It's typical and normal on Ukrainian side, which is actually really bad sign of extreme, almost non-existent command on Ukrainian side. But both sides are sort of guilty of the same problem, except the Russian side is definitely doing better in this respect. Now let's finish with the situation along the Dnipro line, and things here also pretty quiet. Nothing major is happening here, as I mentioned before. Russian command pulled resources out of this area, Ukrainian pulled, and so neither side has ability to conduct any meaningful operations here. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.